All right, I do have 9 a.m. on my state issued computer, so I will go ahead and get started with, we have all our commission members here as well. I got to read a couple of introductions and then we can get this show on the road. I got a couple of preliminary announcements too, just for everyone on the call as we get started. For the record, today is Thursday, February 22nd, 2024. This hearing is being conducted both in person and telephonically using Microsoft Teams and is currently being recorded. If you have technical difficulties or for some reason get disconnected and are not able to rejoin the hearing, please contact Kawana Barbie. I'm going to give everyone a phone number. Her phone number is area code 615 747 5386. If you do get disconnected, please try to rejoin. There is a link to today's hearing on our public-facing website at comptroller.tn.gov/all caps SBOE. There's a calendar page that has today's hearing on it. Or otherwise, we'll be looking for our parties today, so I will email you or call you to try to make sure we get connected. We are present before the Tennessee Assessment Appeals Commission, who have been appointed by the State Board of Equalization to review initial decisions and orders of administrative judges and other related matters. My name is Robin Pope. I currently serve as the Executive Secretary with the State Board of Equalization, just a fancy way of saying director here. And I'm designated to sit with the commission as a hearing officer. As a hearing officer, my role is to preside at this hearing, rule on questions about the admissibility of evidence, advise the commission members as to the law of the case, and ensure the proceedings are carried out in accordance with law. Usually what I say is my role is generally limited to making sure that these hearings are scheduled and take place and that we move forward, that everyone has notice of today's proceedings. But importantly, I do not participate in the decision-making process. That is done by our commission members to my left here in the room, if you can see us on camera. I'll have them introduce themselves in a moment. So my role is mostly just to make sure we carry on in an orderly fashion, but I do not participate in the decision making of today. So I may offer procedural guidance if the commission members have questions regarding procedure, kind of how this works in an appeal system. But their decision on whether to affirm or remand or to reverse the decision is theirs alone. So I would just for everyone, if you're not familiar, direct your arguments to our commission members. And then if you have any questions about procedural questions, I can answer those for you. During deliberations, one of the attorneys for the State Board of Equalization will offer legal counsel if the commission members ask for it, or they will otherwise ask questions to make sure that their decision is legally sufficient. It's either going to be Matthew Childress, who's currently across from me, or one of our other attorneys, Miles Crandell, who will also be helping with the commission today. I'm now going to ask our panel members to introduce them for the record, and then at the end of introductions, I'll ask our commission members to identify a presiding member. The presiding member will oversee deliberations and concur in the final written order. And so when we send that final written order, you'll just make sure that it's correct, it codifies today's proceedings, and you'll sign off on it. And then during deliberations, you'll kind of be the lead person for that. I usually just ask the commission members to identify a presiding member since the chair of the commission is not on the commission today. With that said, we'll go, I guess, from my right to left with Mr. Rogers.
Good morning. Todd Rogers, Certified General Appraiser from Nashville, Tennessee.
Morning, Tim Profit.
Van Bowles.
Those are our commission members for everyone on the call. I will say if you're not able to hear them at any point in time or you think you're missing something, please speak up and let us know so we can try to get that on. I've got a latecomer entering the gallery, so I'll go ahead and admit that caller now. All of the appeals to be heard today are to be conducted based upon the record available before the administrative law judge during your prior hearing. The commission may affirm the decision of the hearing examiner or remand the case for further proceedings. The commission may reverse that decision if they find that the rights of the petitioner, that is the appellant in today's proceedings, have been prejudiced because the administrative ruling, I got another late caller. All right. As I was saying, the commission may reverse the decision if the rights of the petitioner have been prejudiced because the administrative findings, inferences, conclusion, or the decision was otherwise 1, in violation of constitutional or statutory provisions, 2, made upon unlawful procedure, 3, arbitrary and capricious or characterized by abuse of discretion or clearly unwarranted exercise of discretion, or 4, unsupported by evidence that is both substantial and material in light of the entire record. In determining the substantiality of the evidence, the Assessment Appeals Commission shall take into account whatever in the record fairly detracts from its weight, but shall not substitute their judgment for that of the hearing examiner as to the weight of questions of fact. So generally speaking, those 4 factors boil down to kind of layman's terms. Did the judge follow and apply the law correctly? And in this framework, is it the law of appraisal? Did they properly use appraising principles and apply the law correctly in this case? Did they follow proper procedure, or did they not follow some proper procedure, or was there some abuse of procedure? 3, was the decision otherwise arbitrary or characterized by some sort of unwarranted exercise of discretion of the judge? And then finally, 4, was that decision supported by evidence in the record? And so the commission, when you look at the evidence in the record, you're not required to ignore inconsistencies or the fact that the record may support 2 answers. And so in a property framework, I usually kind of boil this down to, you may see a picture and you may see testimony that, a picture shows that the house is blue and the testimony said the house was, red, but the judge found the house was blue. You're not required to ignore the fact that you see those inconsistencies in the record, but you're not able to replace your judgment as for the judge as to questions of fact. So if the judge puts in their order the house is blue, you must accept that as the judge's finding on the evidence. But you're not required to ignore maybe perhaps inconsistencies. And if the judge doesn't rule what color the house is, you can remand it for the judge to make that ruling if you find it's imperative to the valuation or the appeal. This means that no new or additional facts, testimony, documents, or other evidence is to be presented to the commission today. We're not swearing anyone in. You're not taking testimony. We're hearing oral argument from the parties as to why they believe that decision was correctly or incorrectly decided, and if their rights were prejudiced because one of those enumerated factors I've read off. A copy of the record has previously been presented to the commission members using Microsoft OneDrive, along with any written argument submitted by the parties in each case before the commission. If we need to share anything, parts of the record, or if the parties want me to pull up parts of that enumerator record, let me know. I can play both audio clips from the prior hearing recording, as well as display via screen share parts of the documented record. Commission members, usually what I'll say too is if you want to move around to get a closer view at the screen, feel free to do so for highlighting any parts of that administrative record. As well for our parties in person, if you have a physical copy of parts of the record, you're welcome to share those with the commission members. I'll now make introductions of our parties and make sure we have everyone here and identify who will be speaking on behalf of each party today. We've got 3 appeals on our docket. First, we have Mr. I'll do best if I read his name out loud. Shapovalov. I don't see anyone here on behalf of Mr. Shapovalov on the line. If you are here, please unmute yourself and give us a shout. All right, I'm not hearing anyone, but I do see Assessor Gilbert on the call, who's here and ready. Oh, I heard you too. Could you give us just an introduction?
Yes, Sandy Gilbert, Cumberland County Assessor Property.
All right, thank you, Ms. Gilbert. And I forgot to tell everyone, I'm going to ask, how long do you think you'll need to present for your portion?
It would probably just take a few minutes. I'd say no more than 15.
All right, thank you. I guess the reason why, and I'm not trying to hide the ball here, I usually try to go from the least amount of appeals, the people need the least amount of time to the most, so that if you have, only take a few minutes, you're not going to be here for several hours. Ms. Gilbert, I know your appeal has already been continued from Tuesday, and that you have some time constraints today, so we're trying to make that work, and so I do have your cases going first. With that said, our next appeal I have, in no particular order, we've got, I'm just going to go with the people who are online to make sure we can hear you. We've got, what is it, Doubletree, Memphis versus the Shelby County Assessor's Office. I see Mr. Talbert and Mr. Moore. Mr. Talbert, I know you are the representative for Doubletree. I know your microphone stuff was working earlier, but could you give us a shout, introduce yourself, and let us know how much time you think you will need to present?
Yes, sir. My name is N. Lewis Talbert. I am the CPA that does the contracted personal property work for the Altus Group. Doubletree is one of their clients. I participated in assisting the assessor and the audit firm with the audit in question. And my comments are probably not going to take more than 10 minutes.
Okay. And then for the assessor's office, let us know who's going to be presenting on behalf of the assessor's office today and how much time you think you'll need for your response.
Edna Smith will be assessor's office since TMA did the audit.
I'm sorry, I had very trouble hearing you. I think it was Miss Smith.
Yeah.
Oh, there you are.
Barbara, no, actually, I'm with TMA, Edna Smith, and I processed the audit. So,
Oh, okay. So who's going to be presenting the argument today for Shelby County?
I would be.
Okay. And how much time do you think you'll need for your reply?
Maybe 5 minutes.
Okay. And then our last appellants today are actually physically here with us. If you guys want to come down to the table, and you just have to talk into the microphone for me to get.
Morning, Lexi Ward with the assessor for Davidson County Assessor of Property. I would say I would need maybe 10 to 15 minutes.
And Evan Rothy of the Nashville Bar on behalf of Daystar Counseling Ministries, Inc. And I would estimate around my reply at 10 to 15.
All right, thank you. So we will proceed from one appeal to the next immediately following, taking breaks only as necessary. These proceedings are really informal. The board members are allowed to ask questions at any time. Usually I will stop and make sure that the question has any commissions at the close of kind of each point in this process to see if they have any questions for our parties. Once all questions have been answered, the parties have had an opportunity to be heard. We will enter deliberations. Once we enter deliberations, there will be no more communication between our commission members and the parties. I will briefly describe the charge to the commission members before handing it over to our presiding member for deliberations. I apologize. I think we forgot to identify the presiding member. And then they will deliberate on the record today. So you will hear their decision today. And then you will receive a written version of the decision within the next 90 days following today's hearing. I apologize, there, commission members. Did you guys identify a presiding member? Did I miss that? Or if you could go ahead and identify one today. If you have any questions about it too, just prefer to ask. We send you the final written version. I see a Mr. Prophet begrudgingly volunteering.
Yeah,
Was that
fine.
Mr. Bowles? You want to be our?
Oh,
Oh, Mr. Prophet, are you fine doing it?
Sit in the middle, then.
All right, Mr. Prophet. Thank you for volunteering. You will concur in our final written orders from today's proceedings. Prior to each hearing, I do have to read a copy. I will read a copy of the order under review and recite for the administrative record. These proceedings are informal, but we'll generally start with the appellant to hear their first argument, and then we'll have a response from the appellee, typically the assessor's office, and then we'll have a final opportunity for the appellant to speak. I saw someone just try to join. Oh, it's our first appeal of the day. All right, good morning, Mr. Shapovalov. I see that you've been able to join. Good morning, I see you on camera. Glad you were able to make it.
Good morning.
Join with us today. Good morning. You have perfect timing. We're just about to begin on your appeal. I read some introductory comments for today. I'm not going to repeat them since it's for everyone on today's call. Suffice to say, in shortened terms, I'm going to have you introduce yourself, your name, and then I have to read a couple of things, and then we can go ahead and get started. But before I do that, generally, just so you understand today's proceedings, I am not a decision maker in today's proceedings. I do not participate in the decision-making process. My role is predominantly just to make sure things are carried along in an orderly fashion. The panel members to my left will be our decision makers today, so you'll want to address your arguments to our commission members. They've already introduced themselves, but they'll be also be identified in the written order. Today's proceeding is to review the initial decision and order of the administrative judge on your case. And so that's predominantly what we're going to focus on. I will, since we were now moving over, let me pull up some introductory material for your appeal so I can make sure we're all on the same page. Your appeal I have, on February 9th, I sent out a copy of the administrative record for this case, identifying all parts of the record. Let me get there real quick. I'll read through that in the case caption to make sure we all have the same information before us.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much. And let me please to interrupt you a little bit. My English is not my first language. So I'm asking you to speak to me slowly. Otherwise, I would be lost. Okay.
Okay.
So,
I tend to talk very fast, so just interrupt me or raise your hand and just let me know to slow down. But I will do my best to try to move forward in a timely fashion, but slowly.
But once again, yeah, please speak slower, as much slower as possible. Yeah. Otherwise,
Okay.
I would be lost. Yeah, unfortunately, yeah. So to speak today, to present my case.
Mr. Shapovalov, I got to make a couple of more introductions and get into today's proceedings. So just bear with me a little while longer, and we'll let you introduce your arguments. So our first case of the day is. I apologize if I mispronounce it. I know you'll correct me later. Have Gennady Shapovalov
Yes.
and his wife as the appellant versus the Cumberland County Assessor of Property. This is APD case number 53.01-230322J. This is
Correct.
State Board of Equalization case number 139927. This is for parcel 126H, Group A, parcel 6. This is for tax year 2022. On February 9th, I sent out a copy of the administrative record for this case. The administrative record for this case consists of a certified technical record from May 19th, 2023, followed by a May 25th acknowledgement of appeal to the commission, followed by an August 21st notice of scheduling conference, and then finally a December 15th notice of hearing before the commission. Additionally, to that record was a request for continuance filed by our appellant today, and then a order of continuance continuing the proceedings from Tuesday to today's hearing. As a preliminary matter, the appellant, Mr. Shapovalov, submitted a written argument dated for today, or let me see, I forget when this was dated. I think we received it just this morning. I believe Ms. Gilbert, you got a copy of that or were copied on it. It may or may not have gone to your spam filter. I'm happy to share this with the commission. I have a printed copy with me. Ms. Gilbert, just let me know if you have any objections to sharing this written. I think it's just the comments the appellant wants to read today. Oh, you're muted. I'm sorry.
So should I speak right now?
No.
Yes, that's
No.
fine, sir.
All right. Thank you. All right. I'm going to, and so for our appellant, Mr. Shapovalov, I received your written argument in the email today. I have a printed copy for our commission. I'm going to
Yes.
pass out a copy to our commission members because they have not seen it before today.
Excuse me? Okay, you.
I figured knowing that you have you've identified your English problems, I figured it would be helpful to have this written copy before our
Yeah.
commission members. So I'm going to pass that out.
Yes.
And then I have one more thing I need to read out.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Pope, I did not receive that.
All right, let me see if I'll forward you a copy. I can I think Mr. Childress got a copy of it. Mr. Childress, could you forward it to myself and Ms. Gilbert? I'll share a copy on the screen when we get there as well.
Thank you.
All right, the last thing I need to read out is going to be the initial decision in order. I typically read this pretty quickly, but I will try to slow down for our appellant today. All right, on March 28th, 2023, an initial decision in order was issued in this case by Administrative Judge Jerome Cochran. The decision reads as follows. Statement of the case. The Cumberland County Board of Equalization, hereinafter the local board, valued the subject property for 2022 tax purposes as follows. A land value of $25,000, an improvement value of $125,600 for a total value of $151,600 and an assessment of $37,900. The taxpayer filed an appeal with the State Board of Equalization, hereinafter State Board, on August 1st, 2022. The undersigned administrative judge conducted a telephonic hearing of this matter on February 13th, 2023. The appellants, that is Larissa Shapovalova and Gennady Shapovalov, excuse me, I think there was a typo on his name, was represented represented themselves at the hearing. The Cumberland County Assessor of Property was represented by the Assessor Sandy Gilbert, hereinafter the Assessor's Office. Summary of evidence. The taxpayer and Cumberland County Assessor testified at the hearing. The following exhibits were introduced. Exhibit 1, the taxpayer supporting documents and photos. Exhibit 2, the tax card for the subject property. Findings of fact and conclusions of law. The subject property in this appeal consists of a house on approximately 1.2 acres at 110 Lee Drive in Crossville, Tennessee. The taxpayer contended that the subject property should be valued at $51,150. The assessor's office requested that the local board's decision of $151,600 for the subject property's valuation be affirmed. The basis of valuation set out in Tennessee Code Annotated, Section 67-5-601, subsection A, is that the value of all property shall be ascertained from the evidence of its sound, intrinsic, and immediate value for purposes of sale between a willing seller and a willing buyer without consideration of speculative values. As the party seeking to change the current assessment of the subject property, the appellant has the burden of proof in this administrative proceeding. At the hearing, the taxpayer raised the following issues to support their contention that their proposed valuation for the subject property should be adopted. 1, the subject property's tax valuation tripled from the previous year, and there was no basis for the increase. 2, the subject property is in need of several repairs, and that was not taken into account in the assessor's office's valuation. Based on a review of the testimony and evidence, the taxpayer failed to meet its burden to proof in this matter, and the value placed on the subject property by the local board is affirmed. The taxpayers testified that the subject property's assessed value had tripled since the previous year. However, the Assessment Appeals Commission has repeatedly rejected arguments based on the amount by which an appraisal has increased as a consequence of reappraisal. For example, the Commission rejected such an argument in E.B. Kissel Jr., reasoning in pertinent part as follows. The rate of increase in the assessment of the subject property since the last reappraisal, or even last year, may be alarming, but is not evidence that the value is wrong. It is conceivable the values may change dramatically for some properties even over so short of time as a year. With respect to the issues with a subject property, merely reciting factors that could cause a diminution in value does not establish the current appraisal exceeds market value. The Assessment Appeals Commission has ruled on numerous occasions that one must quantify the loss in value one contends has not been adequately considered. Then cites Fred and Ann Ruth Honeycutt, wherein the Assessment Appeals Commission ruled that the taxpayer introduced insufficient evidence to quantify the loss in value from the stigma associated with a gasoline spill. The Commission stated in pertinent part, the assessor conceded that the gasoline spill affected the value of the property, but he asserted his valuation already reflects a deduction of 15% for the effects of the spill. The administrative judge rejected Mr. Honeycutt's claim for an additional reduction in the taxable value, noting that he had not produced evidence by which to quantify the effect of the stigma. The Commission finds itself in the same position, conceding that the marketability of a property may be affected by contamination of a neighboring property. We must have proof that allows us to quantify the loss in value, such as sales of comparable properties. Absent this proof, here we must accept as sufficient the assessor's attempts to reflect environmental conditions in the present value of the property. Final decision in order at 1-2. Similarly, in Kenneth and Rebecca Adams, the Commission's ruled in relevant part, the taxpayer also claimed that the land value set by the assessing authorities was too high. In support of that position, she claimed that the use of surrounding property detracted from the value of their property. As to the assertion the use of properties has a detrimental effect of the value of the subject property, that assertion, without some valid method of quantifying the same, is meaningless. The assessor office testified that the subject property's valuation increased when it was combined with another property at the taxpayer's request. Respectfully, the evidence introduced by the taxpayer is inadequate and cannot be relied on in this matter. The value placed on the subject property by the local board is affirmed. It is therefore ordered that the following values be adopted for tax year 2022. It's the same values I read at the top of the order for a total value of $151,600, $37,900. That is the initial decision in order. It concludes with the final few pages with applicable remedies, including appeal to this body, which is why we are here today. Let me get to one more thing. All right, let me forward. I got the appellant's argument. Ms. Gilbert, I'm forwarding it to you now. I will pull that up when we get to it. All right, now to our appellant. I'm getting a little feedback out there. I'm not sure where that's coming from. But Mr. Shapovalov, the floor is yours. Introduce yourself. I usually ask if you can identify what you are requesting the commission to do today, and then go ahead and proceed into your argument.
Okay, first of all, okay, my name is Gennady Shapovalov, and for short, I'm Mr. G, just for short, Mr. G, okay? So it would be easier for everybody. And what I want to tell you, I informed recently when spoke to Mr. Chavez and informed Mr. Poppy, yeah, that due to my health condition, which is deteriorating, is going down, so I'm going very fast, tired. I would not be able to go through the entire package of the documents, which is more than 200 pages, but I came to the conclusion that I provided in this 2.5 pages of my declaration when I try to go straight to the solution, actually, okay? So in my conclusion, at the very end, in the last page, I stated, once you disappeared.
I
Slava,
apologize. I'm sharing your page that has that conclusion.
you
Just sharing it onto our screen.
So what is the screen? I don't see you. Slava,
It's
срочно.
Mr. G. I apologize. I can stop sharing. It's the written conclusion. It's the document you submitted. Is what I shared on the screen. We can still see you in the commission as well.
Okay, now I understand. So what I did, I came straight to the letter that was written by Assessor of Property, Miss Sandy Gilbert. So the letter she filed with Commission on January 19, 2023. So I attentively read this letter and I reviewed it on my second page, which is findings. So I reviewed it totally. And in my conclusion, I stated, so the letter of the assessor actually came to the conclusion that the property might be cost at $112,000, which is pre-last paragraph on the page 2. Would you please take a look at it? Yeah, okay, that's down finally. If you read finally, there is a statement that assessor of the property actually concluded, okay? So, if you want me to go through the letter of the assessor, I might do this, but I believe we may go straight to what assessor, property assessors offered actually, and go to my conclusion, please, the last page. So if you see, all the paperwork, all the process I went through stated that we believe that our property cost around $51,149.53. Okay, this is estimated and provided, calculated on the pages 0052, 0055, so 0055 is in your last record. There are 247 pages, I believe. Okay, but we decided not to go through this entire process, okay, disputing, debating, and so on, and going to the second paragraph on the conclusion. So also the amount shown in the penultimate paragraph of the section findings, which we looked right now before, is still overvalued, taking into account the current inflation and many other unfavorable changes that happened in the nation's economy during the last year. We might agree to the value of our entire property, lot 1.02 acres, by applying the assessors shows applying 20% of depreciation. We are stating applying extra 40% of depreciation. And why? Why? If you look, if you go back, just back to second page, please. 1 second. Let me, okay. Just about the paragraph finally, take a look. That is from the letter of the assessor. No, just down. That's up, a little bit up. The sales, no. So, no. Please move down, slowly down. Okay. Thirdly, despite, you see, thirdly. Okay, now going down a little bit. The sales use, where it's highlighted, you see highlighted in yellow. The sales used for, yes, correct. So this is exactly the statement from the letter of the appraiser. The sales used for 2022 appraisal were extremely high due to what was going on. So the value in the county increased over 40%, and in some cases as much as 100% or more. So in my conclusion, going to conclusion, please. So in my conclusion, I state, so we might agree on the to the value of the property that offered by assessor in $118, but with applying not 20% of the but 40% of depreciation, which is the minimum or that maximum in 2022. So undoubtedly, this is the absolute minimum of actually happened value increase of property in Cumberland County in 2022, as stated by the assessor of property, Ms. Sandy Gilder, in her letter filed with your commission on January 19, 2023, pages 0087 and 0088. So if you would take a look at this letter from assessor property letter, you would see all I stated in the finding. Therefore, if applying instead of 20% depreciation, 40% of depreciation, we could came to the amount I showed down, but yesterday at night I miscalculated it. It is not 90,960, but in fact, I reviewed today, it is $84,000. So, to conclude, we agree to for our project to be valued at the amount of $84,000. That is what I say. So once again, this is my declaration. Please cross out 90,960 and put there instead 84,000, and that's it. So I explained everything in details. I believe very clearly in those 2.5 pages which I provided in declaration, and I would be agreed, if you agreed, if the commission agreed, to get our property evaluated in the amount of $84,000. And once again, our home has a structural problem. I could not find any contractor to do this, to fix this property. The property is not fixed; it's going down, and I'm looking for many months already to fix the problem. I was not able. I was not able to get a loan because of my wife and my very low income. We received just Social Security, very small retirement benefits, $1,500 together. My wife and I received $1,500 Social Security. So because of that, the problem of fixing the home is still not solved. I'm working on this. I'm trying to solve it. That's it.
All right, thank you. At this point in time, I'll ask our commission members, do you have any questions for our appellant?
When I reviewed the file, I've seen where you had a company look at the foundations and footers, that there was some issues with that. I'm just going off my memory, but in the file, it said something about $25,000. And that work was never done to the home. Is that correct?
It's not 25,000. It was changed even a year before to almost 30,000. But once again, we tried to. Yeah, correct. We tried to communicate with different companies. There are a few of them, 3 or 4, but we never got to the conclusion. All of them First of all, when they inspected the home, they came to different solutions. So different ways to repair, and everybody. Yeah.
That's all I was really needing to see if the repairs had been completed. I'll defer question to Mr. Bowles and then to Tom. Bowles, do you have any, Mr. Bowles, do you have any questions?
Mr. Chapel, I think
Mr.
that's
G.
close.
Mr. G.
G. How long have you owned this property?
We purchased this property in the middle of the summer in 2013.
I believe he said the summer of 2017.
When you bought the property, you have 3 parcels that you bought?
That's correct. So the 3 lots, but 2 of those, okay, when we purchased, there were 3 lots, everything shown in deed properly, but for some reason, we didn't understand actually, they were taxed differently, separately each. The other 2 lots, they are not unbuildable. So those lots, on those lots, there is a pond. That's it. So there is nothing, just a pond. Okay, and this is this information is in this paperwork in those 200 plus pages. Yeah. So actually, there is no land to build anything. So there is nothing to sell if in case. Okay, but this why we joined the property just because it's more attractive. So it's a pleasure to have this property. That is what is our value. It's not market sale value, but it's value. It's pleasure value. Okay, so that is why we joined all this property together. That's it.
All right.
In the deed that you bought the property in 17.
No, I
Or
bought the property in 2013.
13.
In 2013, in June of 2013.
I don't have any more questions.
Mr. Rogers, do you have any questions?
Just a couple things. Mr. G, when you bought the property, were all the parcels included in the original purchase? All 3?
Yeah. Yes. Everything is in the deed. Everything.
Okay. And I'm looking at the sale history of the property. Did you pay $90,000 for all 3 parcels?
That is correct.
90,000. Okay. Thank you.
If there are no other questions from our commission, I'll hand it over to Ms. Gilbert for her reply.
Okay, on admin record 0087, and I think that's the one that he brought.
Okay, just give me a second. I'll pull it right up.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, that's the wrong page. One moment. 00. This is your letter dated January 19th.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, as I stated in that document, Mr. G came to my office when he got his assessment notice, and we tried to work with him on his values. During the countywide reappraisal, my office has no control over the percentages that these properties go up. And like I stated, he stated they went up from 40 and some of them over 100%. So we talked to him. We tried to work with him. During the countywide reappraisals, the effective year built is adjusted on a lot of those. and his was adjusted during the reappraisal. So we tried to talk with him and take his, change the effective year where it would have taken his home value down to 100,800. He refused that value. At that time, he did not let us know anything about the structural damage. So later on, he came in and he told us about the structural damage. So we told him during, if there's property damage, we will do a depreciation on that property until the damages are corrected. We offered a 20% depreciation value on that, and he refused those values. So since he decided to go to the County Board of Equalization, we made no changes to his property. And then from there, the county board took over.
All right.
And that concludes my,
Maybe you could say, what was the county board value again?
151,600.
Any questions from our commission members?
Ms. Gilbert, when you valued the property, did you value all 3 lots as one parcel?
Yes, when he came in and wanted to know why they was all separate. So when someone buys 3 or 4 lots in a deed, they're separated. They're separated unless they come in and ask us to combine those. So he did ask us to combine those, and that land value does include all 3 lots for the tax year 22.
Do you remember if the deed reflected 3 descriptions for these 3 lots separately or one description?
It was 3.
Okay. So it was just a consensus decision that the highest and best use of these 3 independent lots. I'm having a little bit of a problem with the property rights in the deed and what was valued. So I'm supposing somewhere along the line, it was just an opinion and not an appraisal that all these 3 lots should be combined.
He asked us to combine those so he would only get 1 tax bill.
Okay,
And
that's
we
all.
do not combine lots unless the property owner requests that from us in writing.
Okay, no, ma'am. That's all.
Mr. Prophet, any questions?
So to clear this up for me with Mr. Bowles' question, all 3 lots were in one deed and with the house when he purchased it. Is that just cleared up for me? That sounds correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you offer to take off for the damages. He refuses that.
Yes.
I'm looking at the property card and I can't see it. Is there anything taken off? He says there's a pond or something. Does that affect the value and the land in the record here that was sent to the administrative judge?
No, sir.
Okay. Mr. Rogers, do you have any questions?
In looking at I pulled up an aerial from the TN Maps, the comptroller's website, and I can see that pond.
Oh, you have to look at the administrative record. You can't be doing independent research. That's a real issue. We're not here to rehash the value of the property. We're here to review the decision of the judge.
Understood.
We have to go with one.
Right. Okay, so the 3 lots, the $25,000 was just basically a value as one lot, after they were combined That was just.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was one property,
Uh,
yes.
And I think they mentioned this a minute, there was no breakout of the values, consistent with how it had been. I mean, it was just kind of changed the evaluation process changed a little bit when it became one lot versus how it had been allocated prior to that. Is that fair to say that it's just the previously with the pond being on one of the one of the parcels and the other lot in between, were those valued, did those have the minimal values but prior to being combined? Do you recall what the?
What I'm sorry, Commissioner, I'm sorry. The charge is really going to review the initial decision in order. We're getting really into the weeds about things that, if your question is where is it in the record? Was that brought before the judge?
Actually, okay. Thank you.
Okay. If there's no other questions, we'll hand it back over to Mr. G for final comments before we enter deliberation. Oh, sorry, Ms. Gilbert, do you have something else?
Yes, he was talking about the pond area. That we did give that 50% topo. And so the value reflects that 50% topo. And that probably didn't need to be said, but I think he was trying to ask a question about that previously.
Yeah, I just, for everyone today, the reviews of the initial decision order, did that judge do something right or wrong? So when we get into some of these evidentiary issues, it's really, was that before the judge or was it not before the judge? If you think the judge should have considered it and you don't find it in the record, or you're asking the parties, was it in the record? I mean, that's kind of okay, but we're not hearing testimony. I mean, we're not hearing any evidence, so we don't want to get into it. That sort of realm. We're really just asking, was it before the judge and was it included? I'll just kind of try to focus our discussions today. All right, Ms. Gilbert, was that all you had to present for your reply?
Yes, sir.
Mr. G, we'll hand it back over to you. Mr. G, any final comments before we enter deliberations? The floor is yours.
Yes, please. So I listened to Ms. Gilbert right now, and I'm not happy with what she said, because what she tried to explain you, I don't want to say it's lie, but it's incorrect in many statements. Incorrect. First of all, the assessor never, ever offered me $112. It is only written in the letter that you looked right now, the letter written on January 19th, 2023. We never received that letter from the county, ever. We received it from SBOE. So when we looked at this letter, I opened my eyes when I found what is stated there. Okay, and in my findings, page number 2, I disclose this. So I would like the commission to read this properly, and I swear under oath that everything stated here is true, absolutely true. Okay, so that is
all right.
why.
Just for clarification purposes, Mr. G, I have to interject here just a little bit. So we're not hearing testimony today. We have your argument that was written for the commission.
Okay.
And you're having page 2 as listed findings. It mostly recites parts of the administrative record. That's fine. If you want to read part of your statement, I do want to kind of keep this hearing a little bit more on the rails. I mean, we're really here for final comments about, why you believe the administrative judge's decision was incorrectly decided. I read it at the beginning of the hearing. I'm just going to try to refocus on that. You heard from Ms. Gilbert. It's your final opportunity for comments about why you believe that decision was incorrectly decided.
once again, sorry. That I just focus your attention to in the finding that is actually a review of that letter that we received, that we never received from the assessor. We received it from the copy from SBOE, from you. So before I looked at that letter, I never could understand what is going on with all this case. So that is why I actually reviewed here this in the findings what letter says. I review it, and starting with this letter, we came to our conclusion with the property. So once again, she advised us to, it's not offer, it's just opinion, that the price is $112,000. Okay, so we recalculated, and we would agree, if commission would agree, to accept the value of the property in 2022, 84,000. So please cross out in the conclusion 90,960 and put there instead 84,000. With 84,000, we would be, I believe everybody would be happy to close the case. Okay, so if you would accept that, and I want to ask Ms. Gilbert, would she accept our conclusion for $84,000 for the property? If yes, it's done.
Mr. G, this is not a time for questions between you and Ms. Gilbert. This is a
Yes.
time for you to present your argument about why you believe the decision was incorrectly decided. If you have any questions, and the only questions you may ask may be directed to me.
Okay, Mr. Poppy, once again, in my declaration, I disclose everything. You know, once again, due to my health condition, I would not work on the entire 247 pages, because there are many pages are repeated again and again and again. So it was very hard for me to work on them. Okay, but nevertheless, I spent yesterday the entire day, and I reviewed the property assessor's point of view to this property. It was her point of view that the property cost $112,000. It's here stated in her letter, and I accept. And she said that the property price was over estimated to 2022 for 40 from 40% up to 100% and over. So if she decided that the depreciation may be taken at 20% and came to $112,000, so our offer is to accept 40% of depreciation and came to $84,000, and that's it. And the case would be closed.
Right. Any questions from our commission members of Mr. G or Ms. Gilbert? Any further questions? Hearing and seeing none, we'll enter deliberations. Once we enter deliberations, there will be no more communications between our parties. That's either you, Mr. G, and you, Assessor Gilbert, and our commission members. The only communications are going to be between myself and our commission and Mr. Childress
Okay,
and our
sir.
commission. Okay,
Mr. Pope,
thank you. Yes.
I did have one thing to add. It was on administrative record 78 on the property record card. We did have a note in there that he refused the reduced value and chose to go to the board on May the 13th of 2022.
Okay, thank you. We're still going to enter deliberations. A couple questions for our commission members to help guide their deliberations. Again, Mr. Prophet, you are our presiding member. Here we go. So your charge is to review that initial decision order that I read and decide did the judge misapply the law cited in the case. or they otherwise misapply the law of appraisal based upon the evidence presented to them. Did the judge act outside of the scope of his authority? Or was that decision otherwise supported or unsupported by substantial and material evidence? Did the judge have evidence in the record to support the decision that was made? You have pretty broad discretion to do what you think is necessary, except for rehash the facts. Your job here today is to really review that order. And if you find that there is some issue with the order was incorrect, you can remand it for further proceedings. If you find the judge failed to find certain facts or certain facts are necessary for the adjudication of this case, you can reverse the decision if you think they got it wrong, or you can affirm the decision if you think that based upon the evidence presented to the judge, they got it correct. So with that said, the floor is yours. These deliberations are pretty informal. Mr. Prophet, I'll hand it off to you. Usually we just go down the line, however you guys want to organize that today.
Okay. We're open for discussion. I think I'll start to my right, Mr. Bowles, and then go to Mr. Rogers. And I'll conclude.
Well, I'm not into this. Is apparently a complex property, but finding the facts and property.
Yeah, talking to the microphone. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm just reading from the record now. This property is described as a piece of property of 1.2 acres. In the which indicates that there is a legal description, or he purchased this property under one legal description of 1.2 acres. I don't believe that to be
1.02.
Mr. G, this is not the time for additional comment. Thank you. I'm gonna mute your line.
So, you know, if he, I don't have a deed in front of me to check this validity of this, but unless the deed calls for 1.2 acre property, and calls for the property rights of 3 independent parcels that can be laid out by a licensed surveyor, then that's the basis for this whole case, really. I think it should be appraised by what the property rights are of this property. And so far, I find no evidence of a 1.2 acre tract.
Does that conclude your?
That completes my comments.
Mr. Rogers?
Based on what I've ascertained from the record and the information provided today by the property owner and the assessor, you know, I think this came down to just a difference of opinion on the values, obviously, between the assessor and the property owner. And that was presented to the judge. You know, there was a disagreement, obviously, on the values, and it was a pretty wide spread there. But really, one of the points that was made was that the idea of the structural damage to the property, although I think it was understood that there were some cracks in the foundation, the repair costs would not necessarily reduce the value. That would have to be supported, that would actually, you know, if it was $30,000 or $27,000 to repair it, would that actually reduce the value of the property by that amount? That's more of a market-based conclusion that has to be supported. And I think the judge had concluded that there was no support to say that, you know, that there should have been a deduction there. But as far as the final decision of the judge, I don't see anything that was inappropriate based on the information that was available to, if there was a evidence of reductions in value, that would have been potentially a different conclusion made. But based on the information that was available to the judge, I think he made the correct decision. Thank you.
Yes, I agree on both counts. I mean, there's questions as the size of the property, but I looked through the property card. They may have handled it differently than some counties. I didn't see where the land had been cut 50%, but they say, Ms. Gilbert says it was, and I'm sure it was. The, she considered 20% for the damages, and when you review the file, you can see there's some issues with the foundation, and it looks like some pillows supporting the house are a little crooked and different things like that. It sounds like, between 20 and 15,000 maybe, according to what I understood. And of course, I could be off on some of that, but she tried to address that, and some assessors go ahead and cut it no matter what, and then let it be settled in court. But the administrative judge, I didn't see where he, I didn't see where he addressed that. I think he made the right decision, because if Mr. G refused that 20% cut and wanted a 40% cut, and nothing was changed. But it sounds like no matter what, it did need to be adjusted. Assessor tried to do that. There's nothing we can do on that point. The administrative law judge dealt with it the best he could, and there's no appraisal to change any decisions or to show any issues with anything else. So I think I'd open the floor to a motion to uphold the order, it sounds like.
Make a motion to affirm the decision of the judge.
Okay. Mr. Rogers made a motion to affirm the administrative law judge's order. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay. Mr. Bowles, second. All in favor, say aye.
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 All right, the ayes carry unanimously. That will conclude our business for Mr. G's appeal today. We will send out a final written copy of the order within the next 90 days. Then I'll identify any other appeal remedies after that. That concludes the business. You are welcome to stay and observe the rest of the proceedings today, but we will move on to our next case. Otherwise, you're also free to disconnect. Ms. Gilbert, I remember you said you had some other conflicts this morning, so feel free to disconnect. That'll conclude everything for this first case today.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
Moving on to our next case we have on our docket, and I appear to just totally have misplaced. Yes.
I'm sort of making a special request from Shelby County because Mr. Talbot has health issues. I don't know how set in stone the order of the docket is, but I wanted to request if he could go next. I'm just not sure how long he's going to make it, and we had to reschedule because he had a health incident last time.
That's totally fine. I think you guys were next anyway. I think based upon timing, I know he said 10 minutes. I think y'all said 5. Happy to have y'all go next. I don't see him sitting there. I'm going to look to our commission members. Do we need to take a brief break, or y'all ready to continue?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, okay. As soon as Mr. Talbert's ready, we can go ahead and get started with his case.
Okay, he should be back shortly. Let me check. He stepped out to go to the restroom.
Well, we'll stay here. Yeah, if you can. I'll go ahead and pull up. I have to pull up some case information for that one anyway.
When you get my age and you're taking high blood pressure pills, it seems like you have to run to the bathroom pretty regular.
No worries.
Let me usually take my breath for a minute or two.
Yeah, absolutely. You'll have plenty. I mean, if it's okay with you, I got to read a bunch of stuff, so you'll have plenty of time. I'm going to go ahead and kind of introduce some of the procedural history of this case too. So this case was originally scheduled for, I think, back in December. And so the administrative record for this case is the same record that was previously sent out. Let me double check the date on it. I'm gonna read the case caption to make sure we're all on the same page. It's the same admin record that was previously sent out on November 3rd. There was only, I think, 2 additions, a notice of hearing for today's proceeding, and I think a continuance order. I got to double check on that. The administrative record previously consisted of the acknowledgement of appeal to the commission on July 7th, followed by the July 12th, 2023 technical record, a notice of scheduling conference on August 21st, 2023, the original notice of hearing for December issued in October 2023, and then we continue the proceedings to today. Our next case is for that Doubletree Memphis as the appellant versus the Shelby County Assessor's Office. You previously heard our parties introduce themselves, but I will encourage them to do so again when we get started. This is APD case number 53.05-232001J. This is for tangible personal property identified as P083471 for several different SBUE case numbers. The tax accordingly, it's a tax year 2019 on SBUE number 133223, tax year 2022 on SBUE number 133224, tax year 2021 on 137479, and tax year 2022 on SBUE number 141042. Again, that same tangible personal property account number for Doubletree in Memphis. Since this case is continued, we do not have the same commission member panel as we did last time. And so for the parties, because it's new commission members, you might have to redo parts of your argument you may have already done. I just want to make sure you're fully aware that this is a different commission panel makeup. I believe one or 2 of you might have been there, but I know Mr. Rogers I don't think was. And so since it's a new commission member panel, you might need to restate something you stated before. They might not otherwise have access to that prior proceeding. I'm going to get over to the initial decision and order on this case. That's the order for review. Give me a moment. Yes, all right. And June 8th, 2023, there was initial decision and order in this case. I'm going to read this rather quickly, go through the record on this case. On March 24th and 2021, December 13th, 2021, the State Board received appeals by Doubletree Memphis, the owner of the personal property in question for tax years 2019 through 2022. The undersigned administrative judge conducted a telephonic hearing on this matter on May 22nd, 2023. The following parties participated in the hearing. The appellant was represented by its tax consultant, Lewis Talbert, hereinafter the taxpayer, and the Shelby County Assessor's Office was represented by its attorney, Victoria Carpenter. The Assessor's Office witness, Edna Smith, and the following exhibits were introduced at the hearing. Exhibit 1, the Assessor's Office Position of Facts 2020. Exhibit 2, the Taxpayer's Tangible Personal Property Schedule. Exhibit 3, the Assessor's Office's 2019/2020 Audit Review Form. Exhibit 4, the Assessor's Office's 2019/2020 Amended Audit Review Form. Exhibit 5, the Taxpayer's 2019 General Ledger Report. Exhibit 6, the 2020 Personal Property Valuation Charge Authorization. Exhibit 7, the Assessor's Office's request for information. I can actually share this. Sorry, I realized I can share this document for everyone to follow along at home. Exhibit 8, the Assessor's Office's Position of Facts. Exhibit 9, the Taxpayer's Tangible Personal Property Schedule. Exhibit 2019. Exhibit 10, 2019 Personal Property Valuation Change Authorization. Exhibit 11, the Assessor's Office's Position of Facts 2021. Exhibit 12, the Taxpayer's Property Schedule. Exhibit 13, the Taxpayer's Personal Property Petition Appeal Form. And Exhibit 14, the Taxpayer's Summary of Evidence. In this state, all business and professional entities must report annually to the assessor, quote, all tangible personal property owned by the taxpayer and used or held for use in such business or professional profession, including but not limited to furniture, fixtures, machinery, and equipment. All raw material supplies, but excluding all finished goods in the hands of the manufacturer and the inventories of merchandise held for sale or exchange. Cites Tennessee Code annotated section 67-5-903 subsection A. As the party seeking to change the current assessment of the subject property, the appellant has the burden of proof in this administrative proceeding, State Board Rule 0600-1-.11, subsection 1. The taxpayer's tax consultant, Lewis Talbert, with the Altus Group, testified that the taxpayer submitted a depreciation schedule that complied with the requested information from the assessor's office. The assessor's office's witness, Edna Smith, an auditor with Tax Management Associates, testified that the taxpayer only provided a summary of the depreciation schedule with no detailed description of the listing of the taxpayer's assets. She further testified that repeated requests for the detailed listing of assets were not provided by the taxpayer. Ultimately, the issue comes down to whether the assessor's office is entitled to requested information of the taxpayer's assets, which they are clearly entitled to receive and review. The taxpayer's representative provided no satisfactory response to explain the taxpayer's failure to provide the requested information. Due to the taxpayer's failure to provide the requested listing of assets to the assessor's office's valuation of the taxpayer's personal property for tax years 2019, 2020, 2021, and 2022 are adopted, and the taxpayer's appeal of this matter is dismissed. Order. It is therefore ordered that the taxpayer's appeal is dismissed. The assessor's office's valuation for the personal property for tax years 2019 through 2022 are adopted. It's so ordered on this June 8th day, 2023. Signed by Administrative Judge Cochran, and concludes on the final page with applicable appeal remedies, including appeal to this body, which is why we are here today. That is the initial decision in order that is under review. Let me make sure. Let me see if there was an order of. Yep, there was no otherwise reconsideration order or request on this appeal. So you have the taxpayer's argument. I believe. Let me see. Make sure. I didn't receive any other written argument in advance of the proceedings today or the proceedings back originally scheduled for December. That concludes it. So we will hand it over to Mr. Talbert. So we'll start with our appellant, Mr. Talbert. You'll have your time for your initial argument, and then the assessor's office will kick it over to you, and then we will go back to Mr. Talbot for any final comments. Commissioner, you're free to ask questions at any time, but I will always still ask if you have questions at the end of each argument. Mr. Talbert, let us know when you're ready and begin as soon as you want.
All right. Let me say that I have assisted the Assessor's Department and the audit firm on many occasions in the data gathering phase of these audits. And generally it goes fairly smooth. We've had some that dragged on longer than they should have, but basically we've been able to get together and come up with numbers that everybody could agree on in most instances in the past. But on this specific case, in assisting the assessor's audit firm, Tax Management Associates, in the data gathering phase of the audit, I prepared a spreadsheet of what I consider to be taxable personal property. The total cost presented on this spreadsheet was $2,146,201. I prepared this from the taxpayer's annual filings because this was the best information available to me at that time. After several requests, we did receive a detailed depreciation schedule with items marked as personal property. When Edna Smith, the TMA auditor, reviewed this, she asked me about an item described as Hobart 3 horsepower B series 10-inch rotor garbage disposal, $7,687. She stated that she felt this should be added since it was pretty obvious this was a specialty piece of equipment for a commercial kitchen. I agree with her thoughts on this, and I readily corrected my spreadsheet to include the item, noting it as an auto adjustment. The new total of my taxable personal property spreadsheet was now $2,153,888, and I was under the impression that this was acceptable to her. At this stage of the data gathering, Edna and I had already reviewed my calculations for Group 8, and there was no disagreement with regard to Group 8, and nor have there been since then. So we're good on Group 8. The controversy that we have with the assessors in Group 1, where it appears to me that the assessor is attempting to make an issue of the fact that it took a long time and many requests to get the taxpayer to produce a detailed depreciation schedule. And further, the assessor has gone so far as to say that a detailed depreciation schedule was never produced. If this was the case, then how did the auditor find the $7,687 garbage disposal that both the taxpayer and myself had missed? on the issuance of the audit report on December 14, 2020, the assessor issued its revised audit report. This report showed $6,650,193 of cost attributable to Group 1, over 3 times the amount that I considered to be complete and accurate. When I inquired the reason for this, I was told that they had taken the totals from a summary depreciation schedule without making any adjustments for any possible real estate items that had been included in those totals. Edna stated that she had been instructed to ignore the detailed depreciation schedule, which had been marked up for personal property items, and to use the gross total from the summary depreciation schedule. And now both Edna and Barbara are stating that such a depreciation schedule never was submitted. Those who have worked in personal property for any length of time either know or should know that on a depreciation schedule for personal property, there are almost always items of a real estate nature which have been booked in the personal property section in order to get a quicker write-off for federal income tax purposes. Examples of such items are an air conditioner compressor or a condenser, water heaters, remodeling of walls, etc. That is sheetrock, painting, wall coverings, etc. Such items are routinely excluded from the personal property totals along with any other non-taxable items such as software, which certain types of software is excludable by statute in order to get down to what is taxable personal property. It was noted throughout the audit process that the taxpayer had done extensive remodeling during several of the years covered. At the local board hearing, the assessor's representative refused to consider any reductions from the gross totals on the summary depreciation schedule and suggested that we would have to take it to the state board. She even stated the county needs the money. In my view, it seems she was only willing to look at totals generated from what I consider to be a failed audit. And not
Mr. Talbert,
Sorry.
I apologize. So we're, if you're really going to bring up, if you're really bringing up parts of the record, I'm happy to highlight those parts. But I am going to rather insist that you provide citations to where this is in the record. We're not hearing testimony from you today about what happened at the county board or what did not happen at the county board. We're really here to review that initial decision in order. I generally ask people, if they start to ask, the commission has very limited, scope of what they're supposed to do. We're not finding a new value today. We are not finding, I'm going to repeat that. The commission is not finding a value for your tangible personal property today. They cannot, and that is not what we are here for. We are here to review the initial decision in order of the administrative judge. That order that I literally read out and shared with the audience today verbatim. So the order was pretty clear. This case was dismissed. It just provided the reason why it was dismissed. Maybe it's not very clear, and you're welcome to argue that it was not clear today. The commission's review and their authority today is limited to really one of 3 things. The commission can affirm that decision. The commission can reverse part or all that decision. They can only reverse it, however, if your rights were prejudiced because one of those enumerated factors I read at the beginning of our hearings today. I'm going to repeat them now to provide some framework for what we're looking to hear from you today. The commission may reverse that decision if they found that the administrative judge, 1, did not follow and apply the law correctly. Was there a legal issue? Did the judge misapply the law? 2, did their decision not follow proper procedure? Or was there some abuse of procedure? 3, was the judge's decision arbitrary? Or 4, was their decision unsupported by evidence in the record? And so we're really kind of focusing on that. To that extent, if you want to highlight portions of the record that you believe don't support the administrative judge's decision, or point out a lack of evidence in the record for the judge's decision, I can highlight parts of the record. I can share it aloud. I am going to ask that you cite that final admin record that was sent to you back in December with that page number on it, so we can all know where you're talking about. That is the basis of review. So the commission can reverse the decision if they find one of those faults in the order. They can remand it for further proceedings, based upon that, or if they can remand it for further proceedings if they find the judge did not provide proper support for their decision. So you as the commission, if you read that order and you find that the judge really needs to cite to a document or part of the testimony, you can remand it to the judge to support their decision, or otherwise as they see fit. But I'm hearing a lot of comments from you about what happened at the county board, and I'm really going to need you to focus on, is that in the administrative record? I'm happy to highlight parts of the administrative record. I can play the hearing that you had before the administrative judge. But just keep in mind, the commission is only here to either affirm or reverse that decision. We are not finding a new value for the tangible personal property for you today. So with that framework in mind, I usually ask people, and I think I failed to do that at the start of your argument, if you could identify what you are asking the commission to do today. Affirm the decision or reverse the decision, and on what basis are you asking for that reversal?
Mr. Pope, I was thinking there was a third alternative that we could ask the commission to remand it back to the local board.
It would go back to the administrative judge. It would not go back to the local board.
Well, in that case, I would ask for it to be remanded back to the judge. And here's the situation. In my package I sent to the judge, I had included some pages from the general ledger detail that showed that many of the expenses were real estate items. And there are enough of those items, a large number of those items in some of the years. There's enough of those items that anyone should be able to see that there needs to be a reduction for the real estate expenses. And since the assessor would not take any reduction for the real estate expenses, in my view, the assessor's decision was arbitrary and capricious. And by supporting that and accepting it without any changes at all, the judge was arbitrary and capricious. And I was suggesting that we remand this to the local board and have the parties get together again and discuss the detailed listings and see if we couldn't come up with an appraisal that's accessible to both parties. My thoughts are that we should have.
You've got a question for one of your commission members.
I have a question. You were referring to group 1, and this may help. In the file I've looked through, I see some paperwork that refers to group 1, but was group 1 in our record that we have today?
Yes,
of the court case.
Group 1 should have been part of the overall appraisal that was made in the audit report.
And you're saying the garbage disposal for the county to know during which is part of this case that we have here today, for her to know about this garbage disposal that I read about in the case that you brought up, and it was in your testimony, that she would have had to read group 1 in order to know about that. Is that correct?
She would have had to have access to a detailed depreciation schedule to catch that error.
And
the
that would have been,
missed it, and I had missed it. But there was a detailed depreciation schedule that existed that they had access to. Now, I've acknowledged to y'all that the taxpayer took his own sweet time giving it to us. And I didn't know why when we had our first hearing. Since that time, I've learned that the taxpayer's mother was in and out of intensive care during all this time. So I think he had an excuse for dragging his feet on me a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But that depreciation schedule with descriptions was submitted. And the assessor has chosen to ignore that.
But that detailed file of group 1 is not in the file today.
Well, in the administrative record, there are some general ledger listings that depict items that were included in the personal property summary total on the summary depreciation schedule And those items were clearly stated as Sherwin-Williams, wallboard, and those type of expenses that would go into a remodeling of a hotel.
Yeah, it seems like I remember seeing that. Yes, yes, that concludes my question. You can continue.
Well, my thoughts on how to proceed, it seems to me that with the huge difference between the audit report and the taxpayer's version of taxable personal property listing, that the proper thing to do would be to remand this back to the local board or to the judge or whatever, with a requirement that the parties hold some meetings or a series of meetings to examine and an accurate appraisal and assessment could be made and the correct taxes could be calculated. My recommendation is as follows. The meeting should include one member of the assessor's personal property staff, the TMA auditor, Edna Smith, the taxpayer's representative, myself, the taxpayer's controller, Alan Ruffin, and a possible fifth member, which would be an impartial person acceptable to both parties to act as an arbitrator. It goes without saying that this person should have some background in personal property taxation as well as accounting. Perhaps a good choice for a fifth member would be one of the other TMA auditors who has worked on the other audits, which the taxpayer had mentioned to me. Taxpayer says he's had other properties in Tennessee audited by TMA in other counties. And that those auditors accepted the general ledger listing, which supported the summary depreciation schedule. And those auditors were quoted as saying, we know which vendors are real estate and which vendors are personal property. So I think if we could get another one of the TMA auditors included in this group, it would help us to nail down what the true appraisal should be.
Any other questions from our commission members at this time?
I have a question.
Yep.
Mr. Talbert, how much of a responsibility is it for the taxpayer to have detailed accounting, that they can supply that provides clearer information as far as the distinction between what's personal property and what is considered real estate improvements, as far as since you're stating in the record that there were differences between some of the items and that I believe the entries that were entered in were maybe just the merchant name or the vendor without specifically providing the details of what was actually done or what was what kind of personal property or real estate item was included. What do you feel is the responsibility for the
well, obviously, a taxpayer has a responsibility to keep adequate books and records. And in the past, it seems that this particular taxpayer has been submitting a summary depreciation schedule to the audit firm. And he supports the detail included in that line item for personal property by printing out his general ledger transactions, which is going to be vendor names. And neither Edna and I wanted to have vendor names. We'd rather have a more detailed description. But in the end, that's what we had was vendor names to deal with when she and I met to try to negotiate a settlement on this. And she agreed that most of those items were real estate, but there was about $470,000 worth of items where she said that the vendor name was not conclusive enough. And I agreed to that in an attempt to negotiate a settlement because some of the vendor names were questionable. But when you've got vendors such as Wallboard, Sherwin-Williams Paint, and such as that, it's pretty evident to me that goes into the real estate. And all of that's being ignored by the assessor's department.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Bowles, do you have any questions?
No, not really.
No questions. All right, if there's no other questions, Mr. Talbert, are we ready to move over to the assessor's office for their reply?
I assume we are.
Okay. And the assessor's office, all right, we're gonna switch over to you. If you could introduce yourself again. I believe it was, I can't remember if it was Edna Smith or Miss Samantha Smith.
Yes, it's Edna Smith.
All right. Just give us a refresher introduction, remind us who you are, and then the same question I asked Mr. Talbert, if you could identify what of those options are you asking the commission to do today? Are you asking them to affirm that decision of the hearing examiner, remand it for further proceedings, or otherwise reverse the decision kind of on one of those bases? Introduce yourself and then remind us what you were asking the commission to do today.
Okay, my name is Edna Smith, and I'm an auditor with Tax Management Associates. And on behalf of the county, we're asking that the decision be affirmed. I did want to clarify a couple of things, though, that Mr. Talbert stated. Whenever I've done an audit with him that I've done for years, then he provides a spreadsheet. That spreadsheet is he normally uses the detailed asset listing of the taxpayer to create a spreadsheet. The one item that he talked about that I found on there that I felt like was taxable was found on his spreadsheet, not an actual detailed depreciation schedule or detailed asset listing, which was what we were asking from the taxpayer and what we ask from every taxpayer, because we need that detail to be able to determine which group each asset goes in. On the summary depreciation schedule, the furniture and fixtures total the amount that I'm putting in group 1. Short of having the detailed depreciation schedule, then I'm looking at what his summary depreciation schedule actually said. That's what I use for the audit. That's what I'm asking that, and that this whole process has been about trying to get a detailed depreciation schedule or asset listing from the taxpayer. Short of having that, then I process the audit based upon the best available information, and am asking that it be affirmed at this point.
And perhaps for our commission members, did a copy of that get into the administrative record, or is that part of the record anywhere, what you were asking for?
No, it was never received by me.
All right. And any questions from our commission members of Ms. Smith for Shelby County?
I just want to be more clear in my own mind about that. So you never received the detailed list that would be referred to as group 1.
No, I never received a detailed listing from the taxpayer. Normally, what happens is the taxpayer would give us a list that says desks purchased in 2012, for example, for $5,000. Chairs purchased in 2019 for $1,000. That list is what we normally use to determine which group the assets go in. So you've got the group 1, which is your furniture, fixtures, and generally the largest group. So I never received the detail for me to be able to use to put in that group. So when I saw the summary depreciation schedule and the bulk of what they had was in furniture and fixtures, I put it in group 1, which is where furniture and fixtures go.
So that garbage disposal that was talked about earlier came from the summary detailed report.
No, it came from a spreadsheet. Yes, that Mr. Talbert, whenever I've done an audit with him, he uses the detail from the taxpayer's asset listing or depreciation schedule, and he creates a spreadsheet. That spreadsheet, he normally has pretty much the same information as on the depreciation, the asset detail from the depreciation schedule, so I can see, what he's saying was actually taxable, what year the item was purchased, what the item was, and what group he felt like it should go in. So that on that particular spreadsheet that he had created, then that one item I saw on there. But the issue has always been, if the taxpayer has a summary depreciation schedule, he would have to have a detailed depreciation schedule at some point, because you can't create the summary without having a detailed one.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Bowles?
Yeah, what was all of this back and forth and detail and summary? Was all of this brought up and reviewed in the same detail that's being presented by the administrative judge?
It was requested, but it was not received. And that was the issue, was that, yes, that the taxpayer never gave us a detailed asset listing, which is what we ask for from every taxpayer when we're doing an audit.
So in the order the judge, this is the bottom of page 2 and then on to page 3, I'm just going to reiterate. So the judge found, as part of those proceedings, ultimately the issue comes down to whether the assessor's office is entitled to request information on the taxpayer's assets, which they are clearly entitled to receive and review. The taxpayer's representative provided no satisfactory response to explain the taxpayer's failure to provide the requested information. Yeah, and then continuing on, due to the taxpayer's failure to provide the requested listings of the assets to the assessor's office's valuations of the taxpayer's personal property for those tax years are adopted and the taxpayer's appeal dismissed. You as the commission, like, that's what you're reviewing. And so if you find that the judge misapplied the law, perhaps they were incorrect, perhaps they are not entitled under your view of it, and the judge tried that incorrectly, you can remand it to the judge to, allow that proceedings to continue. If you find the judge decided correctly, you would affirm. If you find something in the middle ground, or that perhaps based upon your review of the record that there's enough, the information in the record doesn't support that there was evidence to support a different finding, you can again remand it to the judge and clarify what the judge was supposed to have done based upon the evidence in the record. I think that's where we're at. And so I just want to help, maybe provide some illustrative examples for the commission of kind of your ability to reverse the proceedings today. And that's the order that we're looking for, sort of examples of what a reversal or an affirmation would look like, as kind of the judge's order. Was the judge correct in dismissing the appeal? And then you've heard arguments from the parties today about, what they would like to happen, and sort of basis for why they think the judge's decision was incorrect, either an abusive procedure or arbitrary or something like that. Before we move back to Mr. Talbert, Ms. Smith, I'm going to ask if you have any other final comments. Or sorry, Mr. Rogers has a question.
Okay.
Yeah, as far as the Ms. Smith, with what you're had, I guess, testified in the record for the judge, for what the information, can you just give me a little bit more information about what was provided versus what you were expecting?
Okay. When we make the request of a taxpayer, we ask for a detailed asset listing so that we can compare what they show on their actual documents to what they reported to the county. In addition to that, we ask for supporting documents like trial balances, state tax returns, things like that, so that we can show that the asset listing or depreciation schedule, they're interchangeable. Some people have asset listings, some people have depreciation schedules. But either way, we're looking to verify that what they have is what they physically have is what they're actually reporting. And that supporting documents are used for that purpose. The only way that you can know what they actually have is to use a detailed asset listing or detailed depreciation schedule. That's what we were asking this particular taxpayer for. That's what I was never provided. So I had to use what I was given to process the audit as efficiently as I could.
Okay, so,
Did they-
yeah, what you're provided, there was, Mr. Talbot had mentioned earlier that there was, some either ledgers or showing merchant names and so forth. Was that something that was provided, or what? Can you just kind of, provide a little bit more information about what you had to look at? If there
Yes,
was
that,
anything? Yeah, okay.
that was a detailed trial balance, which basically just tells you that, for an example, if I bought some furniture from Rooms to Go, it would have Rooms to Go and a dollar amount and the date that I bought it, but it wouldn't tell me what was purchased. And because different companies, for example, like Office Max, they sell chairs and desks, which are group 1, but they also sell computers, which are group 2. So I need the detail so I can see if you're just showing me a listing that has Office Max on there, I don't know what you purchased. And normally a trial balance is used as supporting documents to the actual asset detail. Does that,
Yes, that makes sense. Thank you.
okay.
A quick question to kind of go along with that is, so on the spreadsheet, instead
Mhm.
of saying Office Max, just example that was provided, it would just say Sherwin-Williams or something like that. It didn't say paint or anything like that. I mean, like if you had Sherwin-Williams expenditure on the spreadsheet, it doesn't say what that was for.
Right.
Okay.
But the other documents that we get outside of the depreciation schedule or asset listing are just to support the actual number more than anything. We're not looking at those for the detail because you can't tell anything about who they bought stuff from. So we get an actual asset listing so we can know what they actually bought, because I need to group those items in the particular groups that they go in.
So the spreadsheet shows cleaning supplies, things that they would need to work with.
It depends on, now, let me just clarify this. An asset listing or depreciation schedule is going to be different than when I'm saying the spreadsheet that Mr. Talbot provided. The spreadsheet, in all honesty, he had to have had the detailed asset listing or depreciation schedule at some point to be able to create his spreadsheet. What I'm saying is that I never received that asset listing or depreciation schedule. I don't know what happened with it. And my position was, if you were able to create this spreadsheet once because you had the detailed information, I don't know what happened to it, but why can't the taxpayer produce it again? Because there's no way the spreadsheet that Mr. Talbot provided to me, based on his actual creating, he actually created a spreadsheet. The only way he could have shown the particular item that he stated that I found on that spreadsheet that was not taxed before was to be able to have the asset detail himself at some point. What I'm saying, and what has always been the issue, is that I never received that detailed asset listing or depreciation schedule. If the taxpayer,
I think that answers my question.
I think too, just to, I think,
Answers my question.
yeah, I think just to point out on the record too, so the assessor's the exhibits were listed in the order, and I think we're talking about the difference between what the taxpayer requested versus exhibit 2, like the taxpayer's personal property schedule, or one of the other exhibits entered by the taxpayer. For example, Exhibit 5, the taxpayer's 2019 general ledger report. And I'm reading from the exhibit list on, I believe it's page 1 or 2 of the order that lists the exhibits that were received. So I think we're talking about the difference. I just want to point out that, we're talking about things that are in the record versus something that's missing from the record. And so I just kind of want to focus that we are talking about parts of the record. We're not getting into testimony, things like that. We're asking for background, is my understanding of the proceedings.
Okay.
Right.
Mr. Bowles, it looks like you might have had a question. I just want to make sure any questions.
No.
Okay. I forget where we left off. Ms. Smith, any other final comments before we move back to Mr. Talbert?
No.
Okay. All right, Mr. Talbert, back to you for final comments. Again, forget where we left off. So the floor is yours.
Let me catch my breath.
Yeah, absolutely.
My blood pressure had gotten up a little high on this deal right here. She stated that she found the garbage disposal from my spreadsheet. The garbage disposal was not on my initial spreadsheet.
Hey,
I did my initial spreadsheet from what the taxpayer filed, which was the best available I had, the best available data that I had. And what he had was his GL printout with the items marked. So I prepared that spreadsheet initially from what the taxpayer filed. And I submitted that spreadsheet. We made continual requests to get the detailed depreciation schedule, and we finally got one late in the audit. And that is where Edna found the garbage disposal. She did not find that garbage disposal on my list. If it had been on my initial list, it would not have been missed. The idea is she had to pick it up from the detailed depreciation schedule in order for me to have missed it on my original spreadsheet. And that's the controversy.
All right, thank you. Yeah, Mr. Prophet has a question.
On the order itself, on page 2 of the order, it says the taxpayer's representative provided no satisfactory response to explain the taxpayer's failure to provide the requested information, which in my opinion is group 1. That's why I keep going back to group 1. The order doesn't refer to group 1. So I see references to group 1 in the file that was presented to the judge. Did you present group 1 in your filing of the personal property, and should it be in this file?
I presented a spreadsheet that had all the groups on there.
Okay,
and I believe it was part of the submission when we went to the first hearing.
So because of the garbage disposal, you're saying they had access to group 1?
That's right.
Okay. I have no other questions.
Y'all, I'm getting dizzy again.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to the hospital again this time like we did last time. It may be that my blood sugar has bottomed out a little bit right now, so y'all just bear with me for a minute. I'm not doing as well today as I hope.
We can take a break too if we need to. Yeah, let's take a break. I need a break anyway.
That might help me.
Yeah, I need a break anyway. Let's come back right at 11. We'll take a 5-minute break. All right, I think we're ready to get back on the record. We're a little bit after 11:02. Back from our break. Picking up where we left off, Mr. Talbert, it is with you.
Yes, sir. In preparing my initial spreadsheet, I worked with the work papers that the client had from preparing his return each year. And what he had was the general ledger printout. And he had marked the items that were personal property. And so I prepared my initial spreadsheet. I missed the $7,000 garbage disposal, which is a little bit embarrassing to me, because I normally try to catch it if the taxpayer has missed something. I try to make my spreadsheet be a little bit of a pre-audit so that I am assisting the audit firm. So when I submitted my initial spreadsheet to Edna, it did not have the words Hobart garbage disposal on there. It was only after we ultimately received a detailed depreciation schedule from the taxpayer that she came back and said, there's an item called 3 horsepower garbage disposal. Don't you think that goes to a commercial kitchen? And I had to admit, well, yeah, it looks like I missed something, Edna. So I put that on my spreadsheet and labeled it as an audit adjustment. And to me, that's enough proof of the pudding that a detailed depreciation schedule did exist at one time. It's embarrassing neither one of us can produce it at this time, but I don't think she ever gave it back to me. So there's enough controversy that I think we need to remand this for some further discussion and involve some other people, like maybe the controller from the taxpayer, and maybe one of the other TMA auditors that has worked with him on other engagements like this. To me, remanding is the only correct answer on this situation.
I have some other questions.
Yeah, we have a question from Mr. Rogers.
Okay. Yeah, Mr. Talbert, with regard to the spreadsheet that you're mentioning, you know, I've read through, there's hundreds of pages with all kinds of schedules, and was that in the record? You say that you can't find it, or what? Where is it in the record?
The spreadsheet that I made, I think, is in the record.
The one that you're referring to with the detailed asset listing?
Well, no, the detailed asset listing is not in the record because I could not locate a copy of it, and Edna could not either. Although she acknowledged to me when we discussed this that she'd seen it, and that's how she found the garbage disposal.
Okay, so you had given it to her,
I just
was
handed it off,
emailed?
sir. I don't keep
Okay, I'm
copies
just
of what I
trying to-
hand off. Because I've worked with the assessor's office so much on this stuff, I just turn it over to them. I don't keep a copy of it. And I probably should have in this case.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, Mr. Prophet? None. Mr. Bowles, shaking your head no. All right, unless there's anything else, I think we'll enter deliberations. Once we enter deliberations, there's no more communication between the parties and our commission. Mr. Prophet, you're our presiding member. I'll hand it over to you for deliberations. Just as a reminder, I usually try to briefly describe your charge. Again, did the administrative judge misapply the law cited in the case? Did they follow and apply the law? Did they follow proper procedure? Is their decision supported by the record? Does their decision need to be better cited from the record? Something like that. Let's see what the last one is. Otherwise, we're gonna run your discretion is pretty broad. You can affirm the decision. You can remand it for further proceedings if you find the judge failed to adequately support their decision. You can reverse the decision if you find the judge got it wrong and explain what part of their decision they got wrong. Those are really your three options: reverse and remand, or remand for some further proceedings, or otherwise affirm. With that said, I will finally stop talking, and Mr. Prophet, it is your turn.
If it's okay, I'll start. I guess I'd heard this before in December, and I guess what seems to be kind of alarming to me is the taxpayer represented here, his representative, basically implies and says that this was a part of the record on Group 1 and the original record that was submitted. We don't have that in our file today, and I was looking at the order, and that's what we have to deal with. It's what the judge seen and what went through the case, and I don't see him referring to group one. He says basically that the taxpayer's representative provided no satisfactory response to explain the taxpayer's failure to provide the requested information. Now we have the representative saying the information was there. We have a product that he says was not on his spreadsheet that the auditor knows about somehow. If we make an error, I'd like for it to be in the taxpayer, for it to be reviewed again, not that it rules that they're correct. I just don't know if all the evidence, according to this statement, was looked at, if the taxpayer had copies of what he had given the assessor or the auditor, whether the auditor misplaced it, or if it ever happened to begin with. It would be nice if we could review that. I really don't know. I'm kind of 50-50 on this. I'd like to hear y'all's opinion. Mr. Rogers, would you go next?
Sure. I mean, the only thing we've got to go by is what's in the record and what has been stated today by the taxpayer representative and Ms. Smith. On the one hand, you know, and this is what was described in the order of the judge. She's saying that she did not receive a detailed asset listing. And I think, you know, Mr. Talbert indicated that he had struggled to get the information that he needed from the taxpayer, but eventually got it. But it's not in the record, and it's nowhere to be found in the record. So that's a problem, unfortunately for me, is that, you know, if I do understand that when you're looking at personal property, this is something that we handle with what I do. You've got to have the detailed asset listing, and you've got to have specifics on the individual items that are part of that array of assets. And without that, you know, if you've just got the information from merchant, like we said, we discussed earlier, that doesn't really give you a clear indication. That's just, I think Ms. Smith had indicated that that's used for support, to support the asset listing and the depreciation schedules that you come up with, just to confirm that the item was purchased and the date and how much and that type of thing. So I'm just concerned that, you know, the information provided by the taxpayer wasn't provided or wasn't provided in a timely manner, in a way that could be deciphered and analyzed. So I think, you know, if lacking that type of information in the record, I don't see how the judge could have made it, you know, I suppose the judge could have tried to clarify and ask for additional information, but the decision was made based on what the evidence was at the time that the case was considered. So I don't necessarily see any errors on the judge's part in this case. So.
Yeah, this is all we have. There's a lot of, you know, ifs and not sure and all that, but this is all we got. It's what this judge said. And yeah, I'm not questioning that. The last paragraph on page 2 is, you know, unless he wrote this in his sleep, is pretty much would have to be my decision. Then on top of that, I'm a little surprised that this thing hadn't been corrected since 19. I mean, do you have to wait 5, 6 years to correct something that you know is wrong? So I'm gonna have to say, based on the comments of the judge and the fog of evidence, I'll have to say that I don't think he did anything. And I don't know what he heard either, so, but that's not in the record. So I have to go with the judge.
Well, to clarify, from listening to Mr. Rogers here, I thought about that. He should have, the taxpayer, knowing this case was going on and this was a question, should have brung what had been submitted. He would have had time to go back to the person he works for and have them to give him a copy of what had been submitted. I know the man's family was sick or whatever, but still, by the time you got to court, you would think that you could, cause it's, but apparently none of that ever happened in court according to the last paragraph. So with that in mind, I tend to agree. The judge did what he had. No one ever brung any more evidence.
Yeah.
With that being a question that was coming to court, should have been brung in as evidence. So, we're open to, without further discussion, we're open to entertain a motion.
I have to make a motion that we affirm the judge's order.
Second.
Second, all in favor, say aye.
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 Motion passes unanimously. There are no nays. So that will affirm the decision of the administrative law judge. We'll get a final written order within the next 90 days, confirming that, and that order will have any other appealable remedies after that as well. Mr. Talbert, that concludes our business as well for Shelby County today. You're welcome to stay and observe or otherwise disconnect. In interest of time, I would say if you have any questions, you're welcome to reach out to my offices after today's hearing. We've got one last appeal we need to get through today, so we're going to move rather quickly and transition over. But we'll get that order out within the next 90 days. Our final case of the day is going to be the Davidson County Assessor's Office versus Daystar Counseling Ministries. I think they're here in person. They're going to come up. If you guys want to go ahead and get in place, read some introductory material for this case for our commission members and for the record as we get started. You guys can sit on either side. It doesn't really particularly matter. All right. Like I said, this is the Davidson County Assessor's Office. Oh, y'all are here. Davidson County Assessor's Office versus the Daystar Counseling Ministries as the appellee. This is APD case number 53.06-230319J. SBOE case number 181595. This is a claim for an exemption for a property tax exemption appeal beginning for tax year 2021. Some points I just want to make absolutely clear. The initial decision and order on this case was for several parcels. The appeal is only for one of those 4 parcels. So the appeal, I believe, is for parcel 117-150-12500. And the initial decision covered several of those parcels. I sent out a notice of the administrative record of the final record for this case on February 9th. It would be with Microsoft OneDrive. Consists of several items. I'm going to read them rather quickly. The certified technical record from May 7th, 2023. The acknowledgement of appeal to the commission. A corrected acknowledgement of appeal to commission. A second corrected acknowledgement of appeal. Finally, that notice of scheduling conference. Notice of hearing before the commission originally issued on October 2023. A corrected notice of hearing, continuance in November 2023, a new notice of hearing on January 3rd for the commission, the appellant's written argument, that would be Davidson County's written argument filed on January 31st, 2024, followed by a notice of appearance and the appellees as the Daystar's written argument filed on February 1st, 2024. I'm going to read through the initial decision order. I probably will do it rather abridged in the interest of time for all parties. This is an initial decision orders in the administrative record. It starts on kind of page after the introductory letter, page 2 or 3. Order, statement of the case. This is an appeal by Daystar Ministries Incorporated. At the hearing before the administrative judge, they were represented by Carrie Watkins, business manager for Daystar, filed the appeal. The undersigned administrative judge, that being administrative judge Jerome Cochran, held the hearing on March 28th, 2023. Daystar was represented by its tax agent, Derek Hammond. At the time, they have new counsel since then. The Davidson County Assessor's Office was represented by its attorneys, Brooke Thompson and Lexi Ward, who I will say are here as well. Statement of the evidence. The evidence before the administrative judge consisted of the testimony of Carrie Watkins and Derry Hammond, and the following exhibits were introduced. Exhibit 1, the taxpayer's packet of supporting documents, and Exhibit 2, the taxpayer's YMCA documents, and Exhibit 3, the assessor's office's related cases. Findings of fact, the subject property consists of 4 tracts of property, including a residential building and building primarily used to provide counseling services. The initial determination, that's the initial determination by the State Board of Equalization, denied exemptions for all 4 tracts of property. The first case number, that's 1811595. And let me just make sure. That is the case that is, that's the property that's being appealed to today. Involved 1 tract of property containing a residence used by the executive director of Daystar, and the other 3 tracts were building multiple uses, but primarily for providing counseling services. So again, we are here on just the appeal for that 1 tract of property containing a residence used by the executive director of Daystar, and the other 3 tracts were not otherwise appealed. Trying to abridge this and skip down a little bit more so I don't have to read the whole thing, use more time. Switching down to towards the second to last paragraph on page 3 of 4. Based on the past testimony, the factors used by the state to deny the application under the law appear to not be applicable. It was testified that the residence is not only used as the housing and office of the executive director, but it is also used weekly to provide meals for college students, for Bible studies, board meetings, and a meeting area for recent college graduates. In the letter denying the application for exemptions for the case numbers, for the other properties, the counseling ministries, Ms. Bennett said that the services provided appear to be on a pay-as-you-go basis on a sliding scale based on income and not targeted towards the disadvantaged. Ms. Bennett concluded that the Daystar was not using the properties in furtherance of charitable purposes. As mentioned above, the staff attorney denied applications for exemption because the properties were not, in her view, a review being used as qualifying use and not for charitable purposes, while the state board designating the initial determination was almost certainly appropriate given the available information. The Citizen Appeals Commission has taken the position that until an application is finally determined, the board, its administrators, and this commission should consider all pertinent evidence relative to the application at hand. And finally, on that 4 or 5 before the order, the administrative judge finds that based on the new information that the appellant has met its burden of proof, and a change of the initial determination is warranted as the appellant is in compliance with the requirements of Tennessee Code Annotated 67-5-207. It is therefore ordered that the subject properties are exempt and the payment of property taxes beginning on January 1, 2021. It is therefore ordered, issued on April 4th, 2023, signed by Jerome Cochran, and concludes with remedies, including appeal to today. Parties, I would encourage if you want me to go over any of those parts again, just let me know. As well as if you want me to highlight parts of the record on the screen, can do that as well. With that said, our appellant again today is Davidson County. I don't know how we want to do introductions. If you guys want to just do introductions, then we can go back into the argument. But yeah, make sure you have to do talk in the mic and otherwise stay seated because the mic is, we have to get you on the recording.
Hi, my name is Lexi Ward. I am with Metro Legal and also represent the Davidson County Assessor of Property.
My name is Brooke Thompson, and I also represent the Davidson County Assessor.
Good morning. My name is Evan Rothy, and I represent Daystar Counseling Ministries along with Trace Blankenship.
And then if the commission is ready.
Yeah.
Ms. Ward, take it away.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, Commissioners. So we are on here appealing just one of the parcels again, Mr. Pope. 4 parcels down below. Here's that, but there are several buildings sort of all in plots that are at least, if not contiguous, kind of sort of near each other and within the same neighborhood. It's 4 different buildings. The one that we're focusing on today is the residence of the executive director, and so that would just be the home. And that is the only one we're appealing. The other 3 received exemption down below, and we are not appealing those. Of course, the scope of review today is that this commission, of course, as Mr. Pope said, does not substitute the judgment for the hearing officer. However, when an order is in violation of a statutory provision, arbitrary or capricious or unsupported by the evidence, this board can reverse. Because the order is sort of a mix of all 3 today, it is against statutory provisions and it is by the evidence. The Davidson County Assessor of Property is asking for that order with respect to just this parcel. So it would be sort of a bifurcated order in that matter. So the statute in general for a exemption of a parcel requires that the property be used purely and exclusively for the exempt purpose. This refers, the Court of Appeals in Tennessee has stated that this refers to the direct and physical use of the property. And the Tennessee Court of Appeals has further clarified that the use of that property must be incidental and integral to, in this case, Daystar's exempt purpose, which the order did not sort of specify one purpose. It stated religious, educational, and exemption. So it's sort of a hybrid exemption in that matter. So the residents would need to further that purpose. And the issue today, particularly with this order, is that the order on appeal, as Robin said, you know, if the judge found that the house is red, the house is red. However, the judge did not really speak to that in this matter. This, with respect to the residents, the order states the residents provided to the executive director use as an ongoing basis for various programs and meetings qualifies as an exempt use. However, unfortunately, the focus is not on the extracurricular programs that go on in the house. The focus should have been on the actual residence portion of the house, because that's really the question here today, and that's the outlier in this case. So by saying because extracurricular programs go on at the house, it's exempt, that was the wrong analysis. The analysis was supposed to focus on whether the executive director's physical use of the home as a residence, whether that residence furthers the actual portion of Daystar's exempt purpose. And it does not. And I see a bit of confused faces, and that's okay, because it is a bit of a tricky analysis to separate the two. And so in their brief, Daystar also sort of mischaracterizes this analysis in the same way. Again, the analysis is not based on the occasional events. It is based on the residents. So the executive director does live there. It seems as it is a convenience to the corporation. It is, I believe, part of her compensation. I'm sorry, I say her, I don't know. But the executive director does live there. However, the executive director's residence within the home and her living there and using it as a home in no way furthers or hinders Daystar's performance in their carryings on of their business. It's sort of irrelevant. And both myself and Daystar in their brief sort of say that, because whether she lives there or not, the events can occur. Whether she lives there or not, or uses the home as a residence, all of the same programming that they do use the house for still can occur. So really the residence has no bearing and no furtherance of the exempt purpose. It is purely convenience. It has no integral value to the overall functioning or running of Daystar. And the case that they cite and attach, which is the Giles case, also sort of mentions that. It references a case called Dozier of Equalization, where the Court of Appeals does focus again on the actual physical residence of, and this one is actually a bishop. So in that case, it was found that the bishop's home was not for religious, but it was a residential use. And that portion, in that case, it was split. It was a partial exemption, but the portion that was used as a residence, it was of course not for religious purposes. It is for residential purposes. It's a person's home. And in this case, we have the same thing here. We have the use of the home, which is primarily residential. And again, even if we were to break out, I believe they listed at least 5, if not more, activities that do occur in the home, including the resident.
Maybe just talk a little more of the mic. I think that you're having.
Sorry.
Is that better?
Is this better?
Okay.
Sorry. So even if we were to look at, you know, say there's 5 or 6 activities happening in the home besides the director living there, if there are even if there were to be 50 hours of extracurricular activities that occurred in 1 week in that home, that's still not even 30% of using the home as anything other than a residence. And so the primary use is still the residential portion that we have to look at. The activities that are hosted there are certainly in furtherance, and I don't think that's the argument here, and I don't think that either of us are contesting that. The activities themselves could further, and again, if she did not live in the home or he or she did not live in the home, those activities certainly could make that property exempt. I don't think we would be here if a person did not live in the home. That's why this is a key factor, and this is why the analysis needed to focus there. And that is why the order below erred, because it didn't take into consideration residents. It only took into consideration the extracurricular activities. But if she didn't live in the home, we probably wouldn't be here. We probably wouldn't be appealing this, because if the home was just being used for those activities, it probably is much more similar to the other 3 parcels that did receive the exemption, if that makes sense. And I think to say that this home, which is primarily a residence, would receive an exemption, I think that would be stretching the exemption too far, and it's not the intention of the statute, and it's not the intention that by case law, by the state, this board, the state board, the Court of Appeals, and the Supreme Court. We have, homes rarely receive these kinds of exemptions. They really, it's almost primarily limited to the primary parsonage of a church. And really, if there's multiple parsonages, they won't receive more than one. It'll just be the primary one. And even then, parsonages don't always receive a full exemption in that case. Sometimes they are bifurcated based on what portion of the home is used for activity, based on what portion of the home is used as residential. But here, we're not even dealing with a bishop or a pastor. We're dealing with an executive director of a corporation. It is a 501c3, and they do receive nonprofit status, but it is still essentially a convenience to have her there. But again, even if that individual did not live in the home, there would be no disruption, or at least there's no evidence in the record that would suggest there would be a disruption to Daystar's activities or their exempt purpose. There's just no evidence to suggest that if she did not live there, I'm sorry, I keep saying she, but if a person did not live there, the executive director, there's no evidence that they could not still carry on those activities and still carry on that exempt purpose. So again, the residence is not reasonably necessary for the overall functioning and success of the program itself. So overall, we would just ask that this commission take that into consideration, review the order below as having sort of misanalyzed this against what the statute is requiring. And we ask that this commission take that into consideration and reverse this order. Thank you.
Any questions from our commission members?
Just one quick question. Does this house adjoin any of the properties?
I will probably leave that. I'm not the expert on that, but I believe it's at least next door to another building. I'm not sure if it connects though.
It is close by, but not contiguous,
That's
to my
fine.
understanding.
It's on its own separate parcel, if I'm not mistaken. So it's parceled individually from the other 3 that already received the exemption.
So in the court file, I think it's 0094. Does this appear to be the house?
To me, from this, I believe that is the home, but
I can try to get it up on the screen. Sorry. You said 0094?
009. That's all I have.
Are there, the record says there are 4 tracts of property. And 3 or 4 sentences down, it says that in the appeal cases, there were 3 tracts of property.
Oh, so initially, I believe what's happening there, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the initial application for the exemption, there were 2 applications, one for the 3 that did receive and a separate one for the residents. And then on appeal, all 4 of them were denied originally. And then on appeal, all 4 of them were combined before the ALJ for one hearing, and they all received exemption. So the initial determination had them separated as such, but they were all combined for purposes of the appeal. And then we have, of course, now separated them again.
The actual parcel, part of it's our state board system. So our case numbers are parcel based. So it's on individual parcels, but they're being, they were combined for purposes of the hearing. They might have one initial determination, but the actual parcels are still separate parcels. This isn't like a combined lot. That's just a feature of our filing system. And then only one of those 4 parcels were appealed to the commission to today. So we're not reviewing those 3 other properties or those 3 other parcels. It's just the one parcel containing the residence that was appealed today.
That's appeal number 1819595.
Correct, yeah. And I held up that page number on it. This was on the screen.
Are all the 4 tracks adjoining each other?
They are not, they are close to each other. I think some of them are next door to each other, and I think one's sort of around the corner. I believe they're all kind of on a curved street or something. But they're all separately parceled, and so the home is next door, I believe, to one of the other buildings, but it is not.
There are no properties that separate these 4 tracks.
And correct me again if I'm wrong, but I think that one of the parcels is slightly separated from the other 3, and it might not be the home.
Mr. Pope, I don't want to interfere with your time, but just to clarify, the 3 tracks that are not at issue are close to each other. I believe they are contiguous. This parcel that is at issue is separate. It is not contiguous to the other.
Sure.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions from Mr. Rogers? It looks like you might have a. All right.
Thank you.
With that, I guess I will refer back over for our appellee. Same thing though. If you have any parts of the record you want me to highlight, I'm happy to pull it up.
Thank you. Morning, Commissioners Bowles, Prophet, and Rogers. We contend that the administrative judge's reasoned decision on this matter is consistent with the facts in the record, law, and the State Board of Equalization's prior decision. So we respectfully request that this commission affirm the decision of the administrative law judge, granting complete exemption for Daystar's property located at 1611 North Observatory. I'll call it the North Observatory property just to clarify that. I think the address might be. In the alternative, we ask that if this commission disagrees with the administrative judge, that it remand this matter back to the administrative judge for consideration of a partial exemption based on the actual use. As an initial matter, just to kind of clarify again, what's not in dispute, Davidson County has not challenged the exemption granted to the other 3 parcels. Also, Davidson County does not dispute that Daystar does engage in exempt religious, charitable, and educational purposes. Rather, this matter is solely about the administrative judge's finding that Daystar's actual use of the North Observatory property is, quote, directly incidental to or an integral part of Daystar's exempt purposes. Now, the statute, the case law, it's a little confusing. So I want to clarify that this is the standard before the commission. This is directly incidental to or an integral part of. And the Tennessee Supreme Court, in a decision in 1984, clarified that that's the standard for interpreting the statutory. That's what we're looking at today. That's what the administrative judge relied on when he quotes in his opinion. That's what both parties cite in their brief. And we agree with Davidson County. It's the actual use of the property. And looking back to the briefing, based on Daystar's initial exemption application, Davidson County argued that the actual physical use of the property is not false. But if you refer to the opinion of the administrative judge, he considered all of the evidence in the record, not just that initial application. That's because this commission advised him to do so. All pertinent evidence should be considered. And so looking to what that other evidence was that the administrative judge considered, he considered substantial documentation presented by Daystar. He considered testimony from Kerry Watkins, Daystar's business manager. He considered testimony from Derek Hammond, Daystar's tax agent. And in its briefing, Davidson County has not addressed any of this evidence that was presented to the administrative judge. And what did that evidence show? What's in the record here? The evidence shows that throughout the week, the property is used for Bible studies, prayer, counseling sessions, relational support, meals with college students, recent graduates, postgraduate students, again, for Bible studies, training, counseling, board and staff meetings regarding Daystar's operations, ministry fundraising dinners, and more. This is all in the record. I'd refer you to that initial application on page 19 of the record. The factual findings of the administrative judge on pages 164 to 166. I don't believe those factual findings have been contested, but even so, the recording of that hearing is in the record, and that testimony is supported by the timestamps referenced in page 541 of the administrative record in our brief. So the judge didn't make that up. It was supported by the testimony at that hearing. And lastly, we'd also refer the commission to page 197 of the administrative record, which provides a summary documented list of many of the meetings that have occurred on the property from September 2021 onwards till the date that was filed before the administrative judge. And these activities are all directly incidental to and an integral part of Daystar's mission as a counseling ministry that's operated here now 35 years. And I'd even refer the commission to page 99 of the administrative record. It shows that Daystar's board of directors made the determination that this property was a definitive need for Daystar's purposes before it acquired that property. And so this was thought of before the property was even purchased, how it would be used. And that's what the board of directors did. And again, we do not contest that the executive director of Daystar lives on the property as a condition of her employment. That fact's not in dispute. The question is, how does the law apply to that fact? And we contend that Ms. Trevathan's residence on the North Observatory property does not obviate or undermine the exempt uses that Daystar uses the property for, Bible studies, those other meetings. And the authority cited by Davidson County, we suggest, does not hold otherwise. There's no blanket rule that property used as a residence is excluded from exemption. Again, the standard is it must be directly incidental to or an integral part of the exempt purposes of the organization. And so quickly going through that authority, looking to First Presbyterian Church of Chattanooga, and that's a 2003 Court of Appeals decision, and Second Presbyterian Church of Nashville, that is a Board of Equalization decision also from 2003. Those both stand for the very reasonable proposition that the use of property as a temporary residence for missionaries does not fall within the exclusion or within the exemption category. That's not a blanket denial that residences cannot be exempt. And referring to Blackwood Brothers Evangelistic Association, that's a case from the Court of Appeals cited from 1980. It stands for the reasonable proposition that a residence use as a secondary parsonage for an itinerant preacher who's not a local full-time pastor does not qualify. And again, the parsonage exemption is not before the commission today. That's not in dispute. And so we contend that these authorities don't stand opposed to the administrative judge's reasoned decision based on the evidence that was heard at that hearing. Rather, Ms. Trevathan resides at the property to facilitate these events at the property. She's usually the one hosting or facilitating those meetings that are. And to respond to what Davidson County has said, if Ms. Trevathan lived elsewhere, again, there's no real dispute that those other uses of the property are exempt. They fall within the category. So at least some use of the property falls within the religious, charitable, and educational uses that Daystar uses the property for. And we contend that the authority presented to this commission doesn't undermine those exempt purposes just because Ms. Trevathan lives on the property. Again, the authority doesn't hold that there's a per se exclusion from the exemption just by the presence of a resident. But even if this commission adopts Davidson County's contention, we suggest that the proper disposition is to remand this matter back to the administrative judge for consideration of a partial exemption. Again, there's no dispute that there are exempt activities occurring on the property. So if this commission believes that a complete exemption, which was reached by the administrative judge, is improper, the proper response is to send that back to the administrative judge to consider a partial exemption. So in sum, we contend that the administrative judge got right on the law and on the facts. The whole of the record before the administrative judge showed that Daystar's actual physical use of the North Observatory property is directly incidental to or an integral part of Daystar's religious, charitable, and educational purpose. And at the very least, there's ample evidence in the record that we've cited supporting at least a partial exemption at minimum. So we request that this commission affirm the decision of the administrative judge, or in the alternative, remand this matter back for consideration of a partial exemption. I know I talk fast. My colleagues do have another matter, and so I want to be sensitive to that, but I'm open to any questions y'all might.
Any questions from our commission?
Just one brief, very brief question. The director that lives there is a full-time employee.
Correct.
Mr. Rogers, any questions?
No,
I don't at this time either.
Sure, I guess, yep, Ms. Ward, back to you for any final comments.
Don't worry, our other hearing got continued because it was very in flux, so we're good. But we want to take time to make sure all your questions are answered. Just in sum, the ALJ, while he did review the law, he did come to the incorrect conclusion just based on his analysis solely. Again, the question is not whether activities qualify and further the exempt purpose. The question is whether the executive director living there on the parcel is integral to Daystar and its mission. And it's not. I mean, we've also even, again, the activities could occur whether or not. And again, the order does not address this. The order focuses on the wrong thing. The order focuses on the activities rather than the actual residents. And again, we don't dispute that there's plenty of evidence. The record is very full of how all of these other activities occur, how they do further mission, how there are ample opportunities, and that they provide a lot of services to people. But what the record lacks is evidence that the executive director's residence is integral to the mission or even incidental. What we don't have is any showing of how the person living in that building is somehow different than the person not living in that building and how it would be integral or detrimental. Of course, it doesn't. It's not a detriment and it's not sort of just kind of irrelevant. The person lives there and it's probably helpful, but it's not integral. And again, I think we would agree. It's certainly not a blanket rule. I don't think anything with an exemption is ever a blanket rule, and we would agree this is not a blanket rule. It's just that this case lacks evidence that somehow the residence of the executive director is integral and would further the mission rather than hurt it anything. It's really just a person lives there first. We would ask again that this court focus its analysis again that whether the executive director's residence on the land, whether it is incidental to the use and the benefit of the property and of Daystar's mission and the exempt purpose for the other parcels. If you have any questions, but
Just one quick question. You're asking that it be reprimanded back to the judge, go back 100% on the property record.
this body can reverse the order in whole, or it can remand. We are asking for a reversal, but we do see that they are asking for a remand in the alternative that this court or that this commission does not want to reverse.
Yeah, so that I think for commission members, just procedurally kind of what that would look like, it's you got several options of, as you heard me already say before today, you can affirm it. If you just find that the judge needs to clarify that ruling perhaps, or cite to the record, had to, support that decision, you can remand it for that consideration.
We will state that this would go to a different judge.
Yeah,
The judge that
yeah.
wrote this order is no longer with us, but.
Thank you, yeah.
And again, to their point, and to our point as well, that it seems that on this issue, at least in our view, that the record is just doesn't have enough evidence. So another option would be back for evidence of the integral or the incidents of the residents, or another case is sort of a breakdown of what percentage of this home is used as a residence first. That would help determine partial exemption, because we don't really have evidence of how many, what percentage of the house being used as residential for the exact purposes.
Any other, Mr. Bowles, looks like you might have one?
No, no, not there.
Mr. Rogers, any questions? Mr. Prophet?
No, sir.
Nothing further? We're good?
Nothing further from us.
Nothing further.
Okay. With that, we'll enter deliberations. I'll ask the same questions for our commission members. Did the judge follow and apply the law correctly in this case, or is it perhaps unclear whether they applied the law correctly? Did the judge act outside of his scope of authority? Was the decision supported by substantial material evidence? Again, like those options, you get pretty broad discretion. And maybe thankfully you don't have to decide whether it should be exempt today, but you can definitely reverse it for those considerations, or if you think the judge got it right, you can affirm. If you have any other procedural sort of kind of how that would work questions, feel free to ask me. Otherwise, Mr. Prophet, the floor is yours for deliberations.
Okay, I'll start the deliberations, and then we'll go to Mr. Rogers and Bowles. I've had to deal with issues similar in my career in the past. And so, the question as assessors have is, if a pastor lives there, you know, it seemed to fall under the exempt issues. If it was rented out, you know, or something else was used there, then it didn't. That's one reason I was asking if, since this is more of a counseling deal and they referred more back toward, in some of the case study that I read over a lot of the argument and listened to the audio as well, the argument was going back to places like the YMCA and things of that sort, and different organizations that are, they use that strongly in their argument. And the judge, you know, went their direction on those. That's one reason I wanted to know that this employee, this director, was 100% employed, and which, in my view, the judge probably looked at it the same way, that he's a full-time employee, like a pastor being a full-time employee, where a missionary is visiting for a while or something like that, where we were hearing some of the other testimony. Whether that's in the file, I don't remember that, but anyway, it's my view that the judge made the right decision, since in a way it is a part of their director being there 24/7, counseling. Counseling issues happen 24 hours a day with some of this stuff. And I don't know all the ins and outs, but they've been there for many years. Seems like they're, the judge seemed to agree with their arguments, and I'm for upholding that being totally exempt.
Yeah.
Mr.
Yeah.
Mr.
I can definitely see, you know, the arguments on both sides. Certainly, if the property were strictly used as a residence for the executive director, there, you know, that would call into question the exemption status, I think, for sure. However, you know, as was mentioned, I think the other activities in the that are ongoing in the facility would certainly qualify as exempt activities or activities that would trigger an exemption. So the problem is, you know, making a distinction between, you know, how much use is required for the exemption to kick in, whether that be, you know, and you know, obviously there's a possibility that it could be a partial exemption. But it sounds to me like the executive director's functions there are pretty integral with all the other activities that occur there, organizing maybe the Bible studies and the fundraiser dinners and so forth. It all seems pretty integral to me in this case. So I would tend to agree. I don't think the judge erred in this case for this decision. I could certainly see it, you know, a decision where the judge could have said that there would be, you know, partial exemption, but don't really feel strongly enough to say, oh, you know, that it should be reconsidered. So I would vote to affirm.
Okay, Mr. Pauls.
That's two good observations. Okay. I'm gonna agree with you.
So is there any further discussion? We're open to entertain a motion.
Make a motion to affirm.
Okay, Mr. Rogers makes a motion to affirm the administrative law judge's order. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. The motion is carried.
Passes unanimously, so we'll issue a final decision with the next 90 days. Written decision from there, it'll have your appeal remedies. We'll go back to an ALJ and that'll otherwise mostly conclude the case. Davidson County, I think you know all the appeal remedies, but if you have any questions about it, for the final certificate, stuff like that, just let me know. But with that, we can kind of adjourn. I know people got places to be, so thank you, everyone. I'm going to end the virtual call, and that will conclude the commission's business today. Thank you, everyone.